So I can tell you in my clinic, I've used CBD for people having trouble sleeping,
Yep.
anxiety. It's worked incredible for anxiety. We've used it. We use a CBD cream for pain. What other like specific conditions do you see people benefiting from
Yeah.
CBD?
I think overall, the way that I view CBD um, is mostly attributed to kind of inflammation, right?
Mm,
And inflammation, it's the root of all disease, right?
mm-hmm. Yep.
So when you kind of take on um, a different mentality in how you approach health, which is, very preventative versus waiting till something happens until you solve it. Then when you start to deal with things that really help stop inflammation or prevent inflammation, then you're kind of really setting yourself up for longer term health instead of
Mm-hmm.
constantly a yo-yo effect. So for me, I think CBD is really at the root of being very anti-inflammatory. But they've also shown it to be great for things like, aside from anxiety, like nausea.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good for that. I think, we're obviously seeing with certain neurological conditions
Yeah.
that it has big benefits there. So we know that it's being used quite successfully for children that are having a lot of seizures and things like that.
Yep.
But even from my own experience, knowing that our gut health is so related to our brain functioning capabilities, I've seen huge benefits in taking this kind of product where it's soothing the gut, and then my ability to then focus and concentrate and actually function without the need of stimulants, like
Right.
having to caffeinate all the time. And then you're going through those slumps of being wired and then tired and wired and tired. So
Yep. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about how do you pick a good CBD? Because that's
Mm,
the other concern I have is as somebody who detoxes heavy metals out of people, thousands of people a year. I'm really concerned. I love the launching of the CBD world. I'm very concerned that people aren't getting a pure brand. And
yes.
so talk about why you can really have a lot of heavy metals and other toxins in your CBD.
Yeah. So like I was saying, as far as like hemp being a weed, it actually correlates pretty directly to this issue. So hemp and cannabis in general, it's amazing at cleaning soil of everything,
Mm,
of toxins, of nutrients. Like it wants those things and it pulls it up into it. So actually, when they were dealing with kind of the nuclear waste over in Japan, they planted a lot of hemp to
interesting.
naturally clean the soil. Obviously, you don't want to eat that hemp afterwards, but the same is true for here. So if you're not planting in organic soil and following organic growing practices, then that
Hmm.
hemp plant is probably going to be contaminated with things that you don't want it to be. You especially don't want pesticides used in the growing of that crop.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot of pesticides used in our food supply system, and we've kind of realized how much that is now affecting us as somebody that's eating the plant down the line.
Hmm.
And the same is definitely true for hemp. So I think you can find a variety of pricing out there for a product, and I think it's one thing to be conscious of is just like any supplement, you'll have something that, is a tenth of the cost and something that's a lot more expensive. And sometimes it's branding, but other times it is really quality. So I think
Hmm.
it's important to do your research and find out, how is this hemp grown? How is it tested? For us, was really important to find an organic cultivator. So they're not able to be certified yet because of USDA having to go through their regulation with how they want to handle hemp, and so
Hmm.
now cultivators can start to get certified, but it's a bit of a process. But I know that our hemp is grown organically, and then throughout when we're manufacturing our product, we're actually doing multi-level steps testing throughout that formulation process to make sure that it's free of heavy metals, it's free of pesticides, it's free of mycotoxins,
Awesome.
it's free of yeast and molds, and just all these things that could affect us negatively.
Yes.
And knowing that, in my own health journey as somebody that did have a heavy metals reading, it was really important for me to say, where are these heavy metals coming from? And the
Yeah.
last thing I want to be doing is taking something that I feel like is supposed to be making me feel better, that's actually secretly poisoning me.
Yeah.
So it was very important for us to do that due diligence, which is, it's more expensive to do
Yeah,
that.
I was going to say,
right?
thank you for doing that. It's not an easy thing for a
Yeah.
company to do.
But I think there's a lot of companies out there that have that integrity. And, when you're creating a product because you want it to be a plant-based medicine, right? It's important to do that, right? So
Yeah.
just when you're looking at companies, I think kind of understanding what their intent is. Their intent to be a plant-based medicine, or is their intent to just churn out something that they see as a cash crop and make a dollar off of it?
Yeah. And I think, again, I just want to point out to my audience that how important it is that you find a good source. And, this is one of the reasons we actually brought you on, is we were like, okay, we're only going to bring on or talk to people who have already done their due diligence on the back end. And one of the ways you can find out is to email a company, right? You just say, what is your protocol for making sure there are no heavy metals in your product?
Yeah, and along with that, any good company should have what's called a certificate of analysis, or a COA for short. And so when you email them, you can ask them, can I see your certificate of analysis? And that would be a third-party lab report that they get back that shows all the testing and shows what passed or failed. And I mean, it should be all
That's awesome.
passes. There shouldn't be any fails.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
awesome.
something important to do.
And so then, does your CBD come from hemp? And can you talk a little bit about like why somebody might use CBD with THC, and why would they just use CBD alone? And then I really want to dive into, because you've put some combinations of plants with the CBD that's really unique and exciting.
Yeah. So we think it's really important to use what's called full spectrum. So there's full spectrum, broad spectrum, and then isolate. Full spectrum means we don't strip out THC of the extract. We use what's naturally occurring in the plant. So then it's kind of on the cultivators to make sure that when they're growing the plant, that their growing conditions are producing below the federally allowed amount of THC, which is 0.3% by dry weight. So we like having the THC in there, and that's because we believe in the entourage effect, which is kind of this common industry term of saying, cannabinoids really work best when they're together. And THC is a natural cannabinoid, and when it's in the right ratio, you're not going to feel the psychoactive effects, but it's going to go back to the CB1 and CB2 receptors. It's going to act as that lock and key in there a little bit when you need it to. And THC, again, it has a lot of medicinal benefits. And so while we're not giving it to you in the amounts that it would create psychoactivity, it's still having some health benefits in there. So we think it's important to have it in there. Broad spectrum is when you have kind of everything else but the THC removed. And so you're seeing that become a more popular option just because for other countries outside of the US that haven't really figured out how they want to regulate things, broad spectrum is an easier extract to ship internationally, right? So you're not dealing with THC. And then you have isolate, which is CBD most of the time just by itself. I would highly recommend to your users to not use a product that's an isolate. I think for broad spectrum, there might be some people that work in law enforcement or nursing or things like that, where maybe they're getting tested for drug use. And so taking THC is frowned upon in that for their career. And so that might be a place where they would be more comfortable using broad spectrum. From what I've read, most full spectrum extracts, because the THC is so low, and the normal doses that someone would be taking, that would not register on a drug test.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone has to do what's right for them.
Yeah, we've had that. We deal with a lot of high performers, high performing athletes, CEOs that are drug tested, and many times they ask us about that. So that was awesome. So my guess, again, just to empower my community, is if you were looking into it, you would want to ask, is it full spectrum, broad spectrum, or isolate?